For 200 years, we thought we understood it. The Rosetta Stone. The artifact that unlocked ancient Egypt. The discovery that let humanity hear the pharaohs speak again after 1,000 years of silence. Every Egyptology textbook opens with it. Every museum visitor reads the placard and moves on satisfied. Mystery solved. Case closed. Then, in 2024, a research team fed high-resolution three-dimensional scans of the stone into an AI trained on every known Egyptian text ever discovered. Thousands of temple inscriptions, papyrus scrolls, tomb carvings, and medical documents. The entire surviving written record of ancient Egypt loaded into a single pattern recognition system and set loose on an artifact that generations of the world's finest scholars had studied exhaustively. The AI wasn't told what to look for. It just looked. And what it found buried inside a rock that academia had been examining for 2 centuries stopped the research team completely. The 3 texts on the Rosetta Stone don't say the same thing, not even close, and the differences weren't accidents. There was a second message hidden inside the first, a message the priests who carved this stone never intended for Greek bureaucrats, ordinary Egyptian citizens, or centuries of Western scholars to find. Let me take you back to where this begins, because the discovery of the stone itself is a story most people only half know. 1899. Napoleon's army is in Egypt, not as tourists, as an occupying force in the middle of a military campaign that Napoleon believed would reshape the entire Mediterranean world. The soldiers stationed in a dusty port town called Rosetta are dismantling an old fort to reuse its foundations when a shovel strikes something solid in the rubble. A massive slab of dark granite, over 1,600 pounds, covered edge to edge with text carved into its surface in 3 distinct sections. At the top, elegant hieroglyphics, the sacred writing of the pharaohs, unread for over 1,000 years since the Romans banned the old Egyptian religions, and the knowledge of how to interpret those symbols disappeared with the last generation that understood them. For centuries, scholars had stared at the walls of Karnak and Luxor, covered in intricate carvings, with no idea what they said. People guessed they were spells, decorations, mystical symbols whose meanings had dissolved with the civilization that produced them. In the middle, a flowing cursive script later identified as Demotic, the everyday written language of ordinary Egyptians. At the bottom, ancient Greek. That last section was the key that opened everything. European scholars could still read Greek. When they translated the bottom section, they found a royal decree from 196 BC honoring a young pharaoh named Ptolemy V on the anniversary of his coronation. Bureaucratic, official, almost mundane in its administrative tone. But the decree stated it had been written in 3 scripts so that anyone could read it. A perfect comparison. A translation tool built into the object itself. The world erupted into a race. Linguists and historians spent decades working the problem, comparing symbols line by line. In 1822, a French scholar named Jean-François Champollion cracked the code. Hieroglyphs weren't just decorative pictures. They were sounds and meanings layered together in a sophisticated system. Ancient Egypt spoke again for the first time in more than 1,000 years. The world celebrated. The Rosetta Stone became legendary, the foundation of Egyptology itself. That celebration, it turns out, came about 200 years too soon. The AI project that reopened this case used 3-dimensional scanning technology that captures stone surfaces down to the micron level, millionths of a meter. Microscopic chisel marks, tiny variations in depth and angle completely invisible to the naked eye and undetectable by any method available to previous generations of scholars. However brilliant, the system was trained on every surviving Egyptian text, cross-referencing grammar structures, vocabulary choices, in sentence patterns and visual elements simultaneously. It compared the Rosetta Stone not just against what scholars knew, but against the entire documented landscape of ancient Egyptian writing. The assumption underlying 2 centuries of Egyptology had been simple. The 3 texts on the stone are identical translations of the same decree in 3 different languages. The stone says so itself. The AI found thousands of inconsistencies, not random errors, not scribal mistakes made by tired craftsmen working in difficult conditions. A systematic, deliberate pattern of differences, carefully engineered for three completely different audiences, reading in three completely different contexts. The Greek text at the bottom was a political document, rational, administrative. It presented Ptolemy V as a competent ruler. He reduced temple taxes, then released prisoners, funded the military, stabilized an unstable administration. It was essentially a governance report dressed as a celebration, a legal brief designed to satisfy the Greek bureaucracy that had controlled Egypt since Alexander's conquest, written in the language of people who thought in terms of policy and practical outcomes rather than divine order and cosmic truth. The demotic text in the middle shifted the tone completely. Less administrative, more emotional, warmer language, more personal in its framing. Designed to be read aloud in marketplaces to ordinary people living through civil war and watching their country fracture around them. Public reassurance crafted for a population that needed to believe their king was genuinely on their side and that the chaos consuming their daily lives would eventually end. And then the hieroglyphs at the top. This was the sacred language, read only by high priests and the educated elite, completely inaccessible to the Greek administrators or the common people reading the other two versions. And here the text departed completely from anything that could be called a translation. Where the Greek text called Ptolemy a benefactor, the hieroglyphic version surrounded him, with titles like Son of Ra, living image of a moon, beloved of Horus, the one who makes both lands flourish. Dense theological language, complex divine associations, sacred metaphors drawn from thousands of years of pharaonic tradition that predated the Greek conquest by millennia. The priests weren't translating a political document. They were taking a Greek-born teenager and placing him inside an ancient sacred framework, presenting him to their gods and their own elite as the legitimate continuation of a divine lineage that stretched back to the very beginning of Egyptian civilization. Three texts, three audiences, three completely different messages, all carved onto the same stone while officially claiming to be identical. But the AI found something deeper still, something embedded inside the hieroglyphic text that had nothing to do with the decree and wasn't meant for any human reader at all. In sacred hieroglyphic carving, the AI found nothing is accidental. The specific angle of a bird's beak, whether wings are spread or folded, the precise depth at which individual symbols were cut into the stone surface. These weren't stylistic choices or variations between carvers. They were a consistent visual code repeating across other temple texts from the same period, identified for the first time because the AI could compare millions of examples simultaneously. A bird with a slightly open beak might represent the sun in the public text, but that open beak simultaneously carried a separate coded meaning, readable only to someone trained in the second layer, a symbol for imparting breath, for life itself entering the world. The AI found that symbols representing divine order and sacred truth were carved fractionally deeper than the surrounding political text. The difference was invisible to the naked eye under normal conditions, but that extra depth created subtle shadows at specific angles of light, emphasizing those symbols in ways that would only register to someone specifically looking for them. Reshape, a message hidden inside another message. Written not in ink or carving alone, but in light and shadow. When the AI cross-referenced this visual code against the Book of the Dead, temple ritual guides, and magical papyri from the same era, the pattern resolved into something coherent. The hidden layer wasn't commentary, wasn't decoration, wasn't scribal embellishment. It was a spell, a ritual formula specifically designed to restore Ma'at, the Egyptian concept of divine order, truth, and cosmic justice, and to actively suppress Isfet, the opposing principle of chaos, violence, and disorder. Context makes this less abstract. Ptolemy V inherited the throne at age 5. By 196 BC, he was a teenager ruling a country in active civil war, rival factions fighting for control across multiple regions. in the kingdom visibly fracturing along ethnic and political lines. To the priests who composed this decree, that chaos carried a meaning that went far beyond politics. In Egyptian theological understanding, civil war wasn't just a human problem. It meant Isfet was loose in the world. The divine order underpinning the structure of reality itself was under active threat. Someone with the authority and knowledge to act needed to respond at a cosmic level. The Rosetta Stone was that response. The public decree about Ptolemy's administrative accomplishments was the material component, the visible surface that satisfied Greek administrators and reassured ordinary citizens. Under it, the priests embedded a massive, state-sponsored ritual working. A spell cast in permanent stone designed to use the king's declared divine status as a mechanism for re-establishing cosmic order and binding the chaos consuming their civilization. They hid their magic inside bureaucracy. Used a tax decree as cover for a ritual that was, in their understanding, defending the structure of the universe. Then the AI found something that pushed the implications back even further. The archaic language embedded in the hidden spell layer was startlingly old, not slightly old-fashioned. Language drawn from the Old Kingdom, over 1,000 years before the stone was carved. In 196 BC, it would have been as jarring as finding medieval Latin buried inside a modern legal contract. Either the priest deliberately chose ancient, powerful language to amplify the spell's effectiveness, or the stone was reused entirely. What the AI's analysis of microscopic chisel marks found faint traces of earlier carvings beneath the main inscription, signs that an older text was scraped clean and written over. If that's true, what was removed? What was sensitive enough to justify the erasure? The AI's predictive modeling of the missing sections added one final layer. The top portion of the stone is almost entirely gone. Scholars assumed it held more decree language, more praise for Ptolemy. The AI's structural analysis suggested something different. The pattern matched ritual protection spells and sacred boundary markers. The missing section wasn't additional praise. It was a curse, calling on Anubis, Thoth, and Sekhmet to punish anyone who moved, damaged, or misread what was carved into that surface. The priests weren't just hiding a spell inside a political document. They were protecting the spell itself, booby-trapping their own text against future interference. For 200 years, the stone has sat in the British Museum while millions walked past reading a placard about translation. It wasn't a translation aid. It was a ritual weapon built to fight a war nobody else could see, hidden inside a decree about tax relief. What do you think they were protecting? Drop your theory in the comments and subscribe for more discoveries that prove the past was stranger than anything we've given it credit for. Because sometimes what looks like a solved mystery is just the lid on something much deeper.